On May 16, 1942, Matsunuki Murakami, age 62, became the first of 150 men, women, and children to die in Manzanar camp. Most people that died were cremated and taken away from Manzanar after everyone was freed. But Mr. Murakami is still there, a lasting memory to a very sad part of U.S. history. Manzanar camp is a forgotten story about World War II. World War II was a war that Americans generally feel great about. We rightfully give those who lived through this era the title of Greatest Generation. Yet, not everything about this time was great. World War II was a war about freedom, but not all freedoms were retained. On December 7, 1941, the Japanese Army bombed Pearl Harbor. This formalized the U.S. into World War II. The truth is, the USA had been helping the Allies all along, but at this point the United States of America officially went from sort of a neutral partner to a full Allied combatant. Pearl Harbor was very much a wake-up call to Americans. It truly showed how defenseless the United States was. In a matter of one day, 12 ships were destroyed and 9 others were damaged. Fear ran high in the United States after Pearl Harbor, and a lot of that fear went directly to Asian Americans, and in particular, Japanese Americans. Fearing Japanese Americans were going to sabotage the American war effort, Franklin D. Roosevelt signed in February 1942 Executive Order 9066. This was an order to relocate all those of Japanese ancestry away from the western United States. Funny enough, this order did not apply to anyone of European descent like Italian or German Americans, and it also did not apply to Hawaii, where Pearl Harbor actually happened. I guess the War Department realized that if they tried to enforce the order in Hawaii, more than half of Hawaii would have been locked up. It did, however, apply to the western United States, and California had a lot of people with Japanese ancestry. By the end of the war, over 125,000 people would be held in U.S. concentration camps due to this order. Manzanar in Inyo County of California is a mostly barren landscape, but that is not the way that it always was. 10,000 years ago, the Paiute tribe first started to settle in this land. Later, after California became a state, farmers came in to farm the flatlands. But in 1905, the city of Los Angeles began to buy up the water rights, and by 1929, they had dried up the entire valley by diverting water into Los Angeles. With no water, there was no farms, and the land that was there went vacant. It was for this reason the U.S. Army was able to acquire the rights to the land so cheaply in 1942. Manzanar was the first of 10 concentration camps built by the newly formed War Relocation Authority. This new government office was tasked with rehousing any alien enemy in U.S. soil, and all the Japanese, even if they were born in the United States, were considered enemy aliens. The first detainees were forced to build the camp. The camp consisted of a square 500-acre parcel of desert land. A barbed wire fence surrounded the camp, while 8 guard towers made sure that no one was going to escape the camp. According to the War Department, the goal of Manzanar was to successfully relocate enemy aliens to safer areas. This usually meant carefully separating prisoners into different groups. Once interned into Manzanar, prisoners were given a loyalty questionnaire, in which 2 questions in particular would really change your outcome. Question 27 asked if you would fight for the United States of America, and question 28 asked if you would forsake any allegiance to any foreign government. Mind you, this was asked after your government had just uprooted you from your home and put you into a concentration camp. Needless to say, many answered no. But that was a mistake, because those who answered no were sent to another camp called Tulare Lake Camp, which surprisingly was even worse. At Tulare Lake Camp, your best bet was to be deported to Japan, which was a country that most had never seen, since most prisoners were actually born in the United States. Back in Manzanar, for those who answered appropriately to the questions, life went on the best they could. Everything at Manzanar was communal. It was all done in groups, working, cleaning, and even going to the bathroom was communal. There was never a moment of privacy at the camp. The housing at the camp was very primitive. There were several wooden bunkers that would house multiple families. The barracks were made out of wood and tar paper and had no finishing on the sides, which left the prisoners exposed to the desert environment, which in the summertime could be over 100 degrees Fahrenheit and minus 10 in the winter. Some people left camp by fighting in the war. A battalion of Japanese American fighters were recruited from the internment camps. This battalion became very distinguished and receiving many silver stars for valor. Despite the deplorable conditions, the people who were interned at Manzanar did their best to get by at the camp. There was a lot of basic needs at the camp, and the prisoners were employed to take care of all of those needs. The maximum wage anyone was paid at Manzanar was $21 a month, which was the minimum wage a U.S. soldier got, though most camp workers never got above $15 a month in wages. There was once a riot in camp in which 130 people were arrested and 2 died, but no one escaped from Manzanar. It would have been a tough journey if they tried. First, the camp was in the middle of the California desert, and if someone managed to cross that desert, the disposition against Japanese people at the time was very high. They were not called Japanese Americans. They were called Japs, which was a very derogatory term, but used in all the literature of the day. Knowing this, those at the camps did the best that they could for themselves. They built schools and social clubs, and some people were even entrepreneurial enough to create their own stores inside the camp. One strange benefit of the camp was that there was a guaranteed level of comfort in that despite a war, the people in the camp were always guaranteed housing, food, and basic medical care. In a way, this helped the community, especially the elderly. There were 5 communal dining halls in which anyone could get meals provided to them. The meals were based on the food provided, so the cooks did their best to improvise recipes. Some of the meals known were slop suey, hot dogs with chopsticks, and if you missed a meal, there would always be a 30-gallon pot where they would put all the extra meat to simmer. Apparently, at any time of the day, you could eat from the 30-gallon pot. According to this, by 1942, somehow some people got money and were able to upgrade their barracks. So some got linoleum floor and even found extra lumber to make dining room tables and stuff. As mentioned, some prisoners were very creative, and though initially the housing was very scant, some families were able to improve their living conditions. Through hard work and ingenuity, the prisoners eventually made the camp a viable community for Japanese Americans. When the war ended in 1945, all the prisoners were given $25 and told to leave the camp. Most of the prisoners left immediately, but the reality was there was really no place for them in 1945 to go. Racial tensions were still high, and many prisoners refused to leave knowing that they were safer in Manzanar. But on November 21st, 1945, just as the army had forced them into the camp, the army forced the last of the prisoners to leave the camp. To discourage the people from staying, the army destroyed almost all of the original buildings. All that was left was the foundations. What is left today at the National Park is mostly a recreation of original buildings. Only one of the guard towers and the cemetery are original buildings. Today, Manzanar is preserved as a National Historic Site. It serves as a reminder of what freedom really means. It calls into question our definition of freedom and reminds us that we should never let our fears stop us from remembering our conscience. We have a duty to protect everyone's freedoms, no matter who they are or what they look like. To do so otherwise is a blemish on the values that founded the United States of America.